Today, I'm honored to be joined by Kaleb Joseph. In the class of 2014, Kaleb was ranked as one of the top 10 point guards in the country, being ranked number 50 overall in the ESPN 100 rankings. He would go on to play college basketball at Syracuse University, Creighton University, and ultimately professionally overseas for various European teams. But today, our conversation far exceeds the scope of basketball. Post his playing career, Kaleb has now founded his own company, the Self-Help Tour, and Kaleb has made it his mission to be the best life coach possible to as many athletes as possible and provide them with the best tools to help them be the best version of themselves on and off the court. Through emotional intelligence workshops and life coaching, Kaleb is helping athletes lean into their vulnerability, build up their sense of self-awareness, and most importantly, help them cultivate a sense of identity that they are going to carry with them well beyond their playing career and help them navigate any adversities that life may throw at them. Today, we sit down to discuss Kaleb's own personal journey with finding his identity. We get all into the highs and all into the lows, but more importantly, we talk about the joy that comes with being able to pay forward these experiences to the younger generation. If you enjoyed today's show and you want to see even more incredible conversations, please follow along and leave a rating wherever you may be consuming this podcast. It really does mean a lot to me, and I can't thank you enough for being a supporter. Thank you for tuning into the R20s podcast. Without further ado, Kaleb Joseph. Today's going to be a lot about identity, and it's something that you harp on a lot, and it's something that a lot of kids need to hear. And your journey with basketball and your identity with basketball starts at a young age. And at a young age, you realize that basketball can be a ticket, not just to something incredible, but to helping your family in a way that you never imagined would be possible. Mm-hmm. At 14, you're in the gym at 5:30 in the morning as a sixth grader. You're grinding and you're doing work that no one else is willing to put in. And that's a lot of pressure to put on someone who's 14 to realize that you can be someone that can provide for your family in a way that you never imagined was possible. Your parents are both working multiple jobs, and you're saying to yourself, this is it. I'm going to be this light in the world. And I think it speaks to your character an immense amount, but it also speaks to this idea of identity, where at a young age, you have a lot of pressure on you. Looking back on that time now, can you articulate how that pressure might have felt and how it shaped your journey at that point?
Yeah, I mean, in the environment that I was growing up in, that type of pressure seemed what I thought was normal because everybody who lived in my neighborhood wanted the same thing for themselves and for their family. So it just became normalized. But, you know, in retrospect, it was so unhealthy. Like it was so unhealthy. I say this all the time, right? It's the things that you didn't receive, the things that you needed that ultimately like mold you into the person that you are and shape why you choose to be seen in the world the way you do. Um, it just completely overtook me at that age, and I became completely fixated and obsessed with this idea of who I'm supposed to be, and anything that derailed from that path felt like it just felt like it was crushing my dreams, because it felt like it was like pulling me away from who I was supposed to be, and that in itself is just so unhealthy.
Yeah, and especially at the time, we never can realize it in the moment. It's so heavy on us, where we get these blinders put on and we have absolute tunnel vision. And in your case, it's no fault of your own. You're doing it for the best reason possible because you want to be able to provide and you want to be this person that can really make a difference. And that's just a lot of pressure to put on anybody, but let alone a 14-year-old kid. And now you're having to make these immense choices in your life where you're having to think about, all right, what's the best way that I'm going to be able to start playing AAU ball? I'm going to have to start going to private school. Public school is not the way that I'm going to get recruited. And you're having to sleep on friends and coaches' couches as you're making your journey. You're making the transition into a new school when you go to Cushing, and it's just a lot of change being thrown at you.
Mm-hmm.
Change is something that a lot of people can't handle to begin with, but you're having to handle change constantly at again, a very young age. Do you think just the changing dynamic of your life as a whole at that point too just didn't really help the situation, or do you think it was something that needed to happen?
It was definitely something that needed to happen in order for me to get to where I wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the structure of my lifestyle up until that point was it almost built me it almost prepared me for it because when I was living at home, by the time I was 19 years old, I had moved more than 22 times.
Wow.
It was just like one place to the next, to the next, to the next. So I was used to, almost living like this nomad lifestyle. Um, so the idea of like going to a boarding school, honestly, where for most kids it would feel like a big change, but to me it represented stability. Like
Yeah.
if I go here, then this is where I know I'll be for the next 4 years. So for me, it was an opportunity to get like real structure in my lifestyle. And I saw that from day one. And that's ultimately why I seek that opportunity.
Yeah. It's definitely something that not a lot of us think about that being in one environment can set us up for a set of structure, especially like a boarding school. That if you haven't gone to a boarding school, I have no experience doing it, and I can't relate to that
Mhm.
experience. But until you're in the environment, you never know the effect it's going to take on you. I think once you get to school is where it starts to shift away from you're having to figure out your own identity to people are now trying to define you who don't even know you. You're getting a
Mhm.
lot of attention now. I was reading an article. I wanted to see if this was actually true. People were commenting that when you first started at school, you were wearing glasses when you were out on the court. Someone nicknamed you the bookworm assassin.
Oh God.
Was that
Yeah.
that's real?
Yeah, there is. I remember there's like big article in the newspaper. Uh, and the title was it like the Nashville bookworm assassin. And it was like, yeah, it haunted me till this day.
I'm sorry to bring up an old ghost out of the closet. I had to check if that was real or if that was just a one-off reporter. But it was just one of those instances where I was just like, "That's someone trying to create an identity." And I was like,
Sure,
I don't know if you would take that nickname as a compliment or not.
absolutely not.
I'm sorry to bring it back up, but I thought it was just a good example that someone's trying to define you and they have no idea who you really are. And
Hmm.
meanwhile, you're starting at this bookworm assassin level, and now you're leveling up. You're getting bigger in the gym. You're working harder in the gym, and you get to the point where now you're a top 50 player on the ESPN list. And just for anybody who's listening and maybe they're a basketball fan, that's ahead of guys like the Martin brothers. Mikal Bridges was on that list, and he's down below you. You're legit. Like you're a guy, and now you're getting a lot of attention, and ultimately you get the attention of the one school that you you don't really know why you wanted to go to, but it was just a school that had your heart. It took your heart, and it was Syracuse. And you get that phone call from Coach Hop, who's now at Washington now. I mean,
Hmm.
he's such a good coach, and he's doing great over there now. But you get that call, and he's telling you like you're going to be the next guy here. Like you are him. Like there's the joke now. Like you're him. Like you are him.
Yeah.
That level now of identity where you're getting that reassurance from the highest level that you can, the highest compliment in college basketball, that you are going to be the next person, the next one in line. Is that reassuring for you? Is that just, yeah, everything that I've been doing has been worth it? Or is it just an added level of pressure now where you're saying to yourself, I have even more expectations that I need to live up to? I
Hmm.
need to work harder. I need to do one more rep every day that I go to the gym. And maybe that takes an effect on you mentally that you're not even conscious of.
Yeah, it sounds so bizarre hearing it from this perspective now, but I think this is something that happens to everyone, like every single person. Like, when you're young, you see that people treat you a bit different for the way that you behave or the things that you do, and you recognize, oh, they value me more when I behave or do these things. And that on a very subconscious level starts to mold you into the person that you think you need to be in order to be valued.
Yeah.
So that's what it was. And so then you just start leaning into that a bit more and a bit more, and then the world sends you affirmations that yes, this is true, keep doing this, you're on the right path. And mind you, like, this happens to everyone. If everyone were to like really reflect on their lives and ask, why do I do the things that I do, it's probably because of this reason.
Yeah.
So when, you know, I'm now one of the top 50 recruits in the country and I'm getting calls like this on the regular, um, it made me just lean into that part of my identity even more. And I think because I didn't have a real sense of identity and who I am outside of this, you know, I still felt like that scared little boy who was doing this to take care of his fear. And I still felt the weight of all of that. I never, wanted to acknowledge that, but I definitely felt it. And I think that's true for all of us when we have these unhealed things inside of us. They're there, like very, very present, but we try to avoid them, because it's uncomfortable. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so yeah, it was pressure, it was reassurance, it was am I really good enough for this? Do you really deserve that? Like, people don't know. In that clip that you're referring to, he's telling me, like, no, you're the next one, you're the next great one, because I was constantly questioning it. Like, are you sure you want me? Are you sure you guys really want it? Like, it was too good to be true in my head. um and I think, looking back, like, it makes total sense why I was asking those type of questions and, behaving like that.
It's funny how in retrospect we can point them out, but again, at the time, it's just overwhelming to you. And I think the difference between what someone who might be listening and your experience is just the scale. Where,
Mhm.
of course, there are people who play high school sports, and there's the pressure that you want to provide a sense of joy to your family that you're able to perform on the court, on the field, wherever you may be going. If you don't play sports, maybe you're an artist. Of course, you want your art to be validated. If you create on social media, you want to get the most likes possible. That's the kind of world that we
100%.
live in now. But there's a difference in the scale that you were operating on too, where, of course, when someone posts on social media, just the normal everyday person, it's usually people that they know, and maybe they'll get self-conscious of, oh, this person didn't like my Instagram post. What's going on here? Is it not as good as I thought it was? But now when you're operating and you're going into Syracuse, you have 35,000 fans a night who don't know anything about you except that you're the guy for basketball. You have hundreds of thousands of more people who are tuning into ESPN or whatever network you may be on, and they're trying to say, that guy, I know him. I know he's going to ball out tonight, but I don't know anything about him. I don't know what his favorite food is. I don't know what makes him happy, and they don't care to know.
Hmm.
They want to strip you down to this mold that they want to fit you in, and that is basketball player. That is someone who's going to go out there and get them 15 a night. And I don't know, maybe like 8 boards or something like that. They don't care what you're doing when you go home. Taking that away from an 18-year-old kid, and now you're growing up in an age where social media is starting to be more prevalent. So you also have people who are chiming in on sites like Twitter or Instagram and everything like that. Once again, just trying to reinforce some rhetoric that they're trying to dictate for you. When you first arrive on campus, even before the playing career starts, could you feel this aura in the air that people would just look at you differently? Maybe they could tell who you were. They could get this idea of who Kaleb Joseph was in their mind, but they didn't really want to get to know the real Kaleb Joseph.
Absolutely. Syracuse is one of those cult like fan bases, up there with Kentucky. Honestly, I wouldn't even say Duke, like Kentucky. Um, who else? Kansas.
You know,
So they're just like these like cult like fan bases, and you can feel that before you even step on campus, right? Like when it's known that you're someone that they're prioritizing in the recruiting process, they come in waves, and you know, and initially it comes as support. And it's, oh, come to Syracuse, you're going to be this, you're going to be that. It's everybody's like championing you. And then you get to campus and they build you up even more everywhere you go. Walking down Marshall Street, the fans are out. Your students, the classmates, they're high-fiving you. Everybody's taking pictures of you on campus. It's this like world within itself. um, and you can't help but feed into it when you aren't secure in who you are, when you're not grounded and anchored by truth of who you are. It will have you spinning with the wind.
yeah,
And that happens to so many recruits. And then you get out there, and the moment you show any glimpses where you're not who they think you are, that's when they show you who they really are. And it just, oh, you suck, you're not this, you're not that, I knew you weren't good enough. And it's just like this polar opposite approach that they've had this whole time. And because you fed into it, it now has the power to completely, sink you. And that's what happens. It's hard not to,
Yeah.
but I see it happen to so many athletes that I work with today.
And from a fan perspective, we don't think anything of it,
Mm,
especially at a professional level. I'll be the first one to admit that if I love the Yankees, I love the Giants, I love the Knicks. If I see one of the players on the team who are not performing to the level, I'm the first one to say, "Oh, that guy's a bum. Why is he out there?"
100%.
I'm talking about a human being. I know nothing about him. I just know that I don't think he's performing well on that day. Meanwhile, he's a professional athlete.
Hmm.
College athletes, they have the most love for the game out of anybody. They're the ones who are grinding and they have this dream of getting to the next level. And I went to a smaller school where we didn't have as much school spirit, I guess you could call it, for our teams. And I can't really relate to what it was like to be in an arena with that many people. But I certainly saw the same kind of thing at our school where people would be like, "Ah, no, our basketball team, oh no, they're not performing to the standard that we have for them. I'm not even going to go to the games. They're trash," or words that would get thrown around. These are guys that are
Trash.
just walking around
That's the
campus.
word.
They're, yeah, like literally calling human beings trash, and we're all guilty of it as fans. And then these are the same guys on the basketball team, same girls on the basketball team that are just in our class. They're in our finance 101 class, and we got to sit next to them. Meanwhile, we just called them trash the other day once we watched them play. And you're at Syracuse, and you said it perfectly. As quickly as they love you, they will hate you. Just they will turn on you, complete 180 without question. And unfortunately, that's what happened in your story. Is things didn't work out as everyone would have hoped, and there were flaws in your game that coaches would love to harp on, and they would make comments to the media saying that there were some inconsistencies in the game, and it just comments that you don't want to hear as a player, and they can certainly take its toll on you. And you've been very open and honest about it, and I appreciate it as someone who's just a big advocate for mental health, especially in athletes. That it took a significant toll on your mental health to the point where you didn't even want to leave your room after a game, and you were just
Sure.
so isolated in your own head. Being away from home and having limited resources at the time. This is a time in the NCAA where mental health is not being promoted the way that it is now. With those limited resources, what's the voice in your head telling you at that time? What's some of the language that you're using with yourself, and how did it impact you? Not just when you went to class, not just when you went on the court, but just in day to day interactions. Did you feel you were even present during those, or did it feel just like a shell of you was present?
Yeah, honestly, it's like a slow, like numbing feeling. I think in the beginning, because there's this huge wave of emotions, it's overwhelming, but the body can't sustain that level of intensity for too long. So then, slowly but surely you start to disassociate and pull yourself away from the spotlight. And for me, that's it, and it happens, slowly and subtly. But for me, it was, after a bad game, um, it was, okay, I'm just going to sleep in a little bit extra today. And then it goes from I'm just going to sleep in a little bit extra to I'm just not getting out of bed. And then it's okay, I'm not getting out of bed. Now I'm not eating, and it's these early signs of depression. And and then when I would try to build up the courage to go to class, I'd see classmates of mine who were just on Twitter talking shit about me sitting next to me, and it created this um, level of social anxiety that I've never felt before. And because I'm supposed to be this guy, I didn't feel comfortable talking to anyone about it because that was too challenging to the identity that I was supposed to have. The fact that I was in this position alone was challenging enough. And to now, admit that it was taking its toll on me felt life threatening. Um, and it does for most people. And that's why we don't lean into vulnerability and we just numb our way through life. Uh, and that was the early stages of that. It was very intense. Um, but I see it every day in so many athletes, in the athletes that I work with. Um, that's why it's so important to create that space for them to be able to just show up as they are, not who, they think that they need to be.
That quote right there is great. It's not who you need to be, it's who you are truly. And there's a significant amount of shame that we place on ourselves when our mental health isn't where we think it needs to be. And I use those words very intentionally. Needs to be is the incorrect word. We all heal differently, we all feel differently. But young kids are so mean. We love to create this hierarchy where if someone isn't performing to a standard, we love to tell people that we're better. If someone isn't healing as quickly as we think that they should be, we love to put a label on them and say, if you, I just had a whole conversation with a trauma psychologist. And if you look at like the DSM, which is like the handbook that all doctors are going to use, they talk about if you're grieving for longer than 6 months, they're going to diagnose you with depression, just put a label on you. Meanwhile, they
Hmm.
have no idea what you're going through, and they have no idea how wide the net needs to be cast as what causes trauma and what causes stress. And
Hmm.
someone might look at your case and they might say, "Oh, boo-hoo! The what kind of stress? You're one of the highest level athletes. This is what comes with the trade, is all
Yep.
the criticism." That's a really bad excuse for treating someone really poorly. And that you didn't sign up to be criticized. You signed up because you want to be in a position to provide for your family and you want to make a difference. You didn't sign up to just be a punching bag, honestly,
Hmm.
for just people just throwing words at you. And ultimately, it leads you to making a decision where, and this is also pre-transfer portal given. So you
Hmm.
make the decision that you're going to go to Creighton because it is the farthest away school that you could think of possible, and you make the transition over there. And I always have this phrase that I try to use. I think it applies later on in your story, but we'll get there. And it's you can go wherever you need to go, but wherever you go, you have to take your head with you. And you go to Creighton because it's far away, but those same mental impacts are still coming with you when you go to Creighton. And it's awesome to see what Creighton did for you. It opened you up to finding this path that you're on now. You start taking classes on emotional intelligence and you start being more in tune with that side. And I think Creighton was certainly great for you in that aspect. We're going to get into a little bit of the basketball side too. But looking back on that now too, do you think that the location necessarily wasn't the most important thing in the world? Do you think you could have done it at a couple different places, but you just wanted to be as far away as possible, but it didn't necessarily need to be?
I think everything has the opportunity to work out for you.
Yeah.
No matter what decision you make, there's like you're it's going to work out if you do the work. Yeah, I think, like to what you were saying earlier about the trauma and the fans and like their relation, like the fan relationship to the athletes. Um, I used to hear that so much, like, oh, like, and even now, like, I don't watch games like out at a bar or like in public with other people because it drives me nuts.
Yeah.
The lack of perspective. And, it wasn't until I got into this space of studying identity and studying addiction and depression and, you know, the effects of not dealing with trauma head on, I realized, holy shit, everybody out here is just pretending. Like
Yeah.
everybody out here is just pretending like they have all their shit together because the stats on addiction, the stats on depression, the stats on depth, the stats on obesity, they don't lie. And there's a reason you're going to all of these things, and it's because you don't want to face the reality, right? So you're struggling with the same thing that I'm struggling with. You just don't want to talk about it as much as I don't want to talk about it,
Yeah.
you know? So you would rather, the comment that you made about like kids being mean, it's not that we're innately mean. It's that we would rather take the light and shine it on you before anybody has a chance to shine it on us.
No.
So that's why you see kids who don't know themselves pile on and become bullies, and everybody starts pointing at the one kid in the room because as long as the light's over there, nobody can see me. And that same mindset, you see that in adults, right? Because the kid who is afraid to face himself turns into the adult who's afraid to face themselves. And I just lacked that perspective. I had no perspective at the time because I was too close to it. So for me, when I went to Creighton in Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm all the way from New Hampshire, it felt like I was running. That was my attempt of running away. Um, and I'm so glad that I chose Creighton because the courses that I took at that school, they weren't being offered at every school. Creighton was a Jesuit school where they took this whole person's health approach to all of their to all of their courses, because they wanted to educate the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. And you can't get that at every school. So going to Creighton, I don't know if I could have done it at every school, because exactly what I needed is exactly what I got at Creighton through that education system. Um, so yeah, I think, to answer your question, Creighton was the spot for me.
Yeah.
I didn't know that at the time, but I'm so glad that I ended up there.
I love that answer for multiple reasons I'll get into, but I'm glad to hear that it was the right choice because far too often I do hear people say that they're just going to make that move to a place that they never thought they would be, and it's not what they thought it would be, just because they didn't do their research. But it sounds like you did your homework before you did it, which is
I
important.
didn't.
Oh,
I
you
didn't. I didn't.
did.
I was running. It was the furthest school away. I had no idea about the education. I just got there, and
Yeah,
then while I'm here, I'm like, oh wow! Like, I just became interested in these courses because I knew that I needed to fix something inside of me. So I just
yeah,
gravitated towards it naturally. Once I got on campus, and then one thing just led into to another. And maybe if I went to another school, it would have been something else. But I
yeah.
thank God that it was that at Creighton.
I was just gonna say I chalk that up to God. I think that there's a path that He's gonna put us on, and I think He led you there. And of course, we can debate all day. Maybe, oh, it could have happened at other schools, but I don't think it's part of the argument now. I think it was just a point that I wanted to touch on because I know some people that will happen to it, but I'm glad that God brought you there. And that you mentioned the Jesuit education. I went to Fairfield, also a Jesuit school. And when I reflect upon how impactful that education was on me, I can't be more grateful that they gave us this holistic view of the person where it was always about finding God in all things. They refer to it as. If you're not religious, anybody who's listening, you can think of it as finding good in all things. Just trying to see
Mhm.
the world for all the good that it is, because there's a lot of joy to be found in it, and you just have to be willing to look, looking at the world in a different way that you never thought you could, looking at yourself in a way that you never thought you could. It's really important, and I thought it was crucial. I'm glad that you thought it was crucial too, and you're clearly applying those same principles to your work now. And there's one aspect of Korean before we go on to your work now that I just wanted to touch on because I thought it was really fascinating. Is before you get there, Sports Illustrated comes out with a list, and they refer to you as one of the top 10 biggest disappointments in the country.
Yeah.
Again, just reporters making lists that are going to entertain people, and they have no idea the impact that that's going to have on somebody. But what I thought was really interesting is that there was someone else on that list who might have been one of the only people that could truly relate to your experience. And he wasn't just your teammate, he was your roommate in Marcus Foster.
Yeah.
What was that like? Again, just talk about fate. Bringing someone into your life who can actually understand the same kind of thing that you're going through. Yeah, the first year you have to, before the transfer portal, you have to take your time and you have to take the year. But I think Marcus was playing at that time.
He was.
Yeah, what was it like just to have him around when he could truly understand what you're going through and have him guide you into this new period of your life?
It's so bizarre because even like through all these years, um, like it wasn't until last year that I realized that Marcus was also on that list, because when I saw that article, like my name was in the title. I didn't even bother to read the rest of it. I
Yeah,
saw my name in the title of top 10 most disappointing players in the country, and I didn't even bother reading the rest of it. So I had no idea that Marcus was on that list. And it wasn't until I started, this healing process for myself, that I was able to, look at these things for what they were with a different perspective. And then I saw that. So, again, just like in retrospect, looking back, just puzzle pieces coming together that, he, I see why, we connected the way we did at that time. At the
yeah.
moment, I didn't realize why, but now I realize, there was something bigger going on.
There's always a bigger plan in action in my mind, and we may never be able to understand why that plan is happening. And even at the time, we might even be privy to it happening. But something's always going on in the background, and it's those connections that we make in our life that really help us get through the toughest times in our life and help us get to the place that we need to be. And you end up finishing up your career at Creighton, and you realize that the NBA probably isn't the route, especially through the draft, that is going to be in the cards. But you do go overseas, and again, this idea of having to take your head with you to a place that maybe you never thought that you were going to be. Uh, the effect that being alone in a new country takes on you, and you've told some pretty horrible stories just about coaches not paying you on time, threatening to not pay you at all,
Yeah,
having to take 17-hour bus rides just to sleep in the bus and not even in a hotel.
yeah.
And now, how old would you be at this point? Are you 20, 21 when this is
Yeah,
happening?
I'm like probably 22 years old.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's just a whole nother like shock to the system because now you go from this treatment where I'm flying on private jets to games, like
Hmm.
chartered flights, like you're treated like royalty when you're playing at this level of college basketball. And then, it's this humbling experience. So now you're taking a 17-hour bus trip. Um, and again, because you feel like you need to uphold this certain identity, you feel shame surrounding your experience, the reality of your experience. So you don't tell anybody about it, right?
Yeah.
And I see so many players who are playing overseas right now. And unless you've ever lived that experience, there's just certain nuances of the struggle of that lifestyle that nobody else can understand. And I see these players posting on social media, like putting this like facade, putting this front up as if they're living this, you know, and it is a dream. I don't want to take anything away from it, but I know the realities of what that dream looks like. And to me, it breaks my heart for some of these guys because I see them still trying to perform, put on this performance for everyone. I see like, the inner child version of them trying to sing and dance for everybody's validation. And it makes me very sad for some of these guys. Because there's a select few overseas that make it to a level where it's the joy that everybody imagines. you know um, it's very competitive. And I remember experiences like for 6 months straight didn't see a paycheck. 6 months straight didn't see a
Christ.
single dollar. Every single day my bank account is getting lower and lower and lower because this is my means of income. I'm fresh out of college. I don't have money in my bank. This was before the NIL days. So to live in that type of stress and then to be pretending to everybody else back home in the States that I'm living a different lifestyle. And then to still be, sending money home because my family thinks I'm living a certain lifestyle. Like this is something that it's all smoke and mirrors. And I'm draining myself daily to, you know, continue this image. It's exhausting. Um, and I see so many athletes do it. I see it every single day. And imagine doing all of that all out of fear of telling people what's really going on, telling people and showing up as you really are, you know?
Yeah. To me, it sounds like the crossroads for identity. This is the pinnacle of everything that we've been talking about, where you have to keep up this identity because you told everyone back at home that you were going to be the guy that was going that was going to be able to help provide monetarily and help be that guy that when you come home, everyone can look up to you and they can be like, "That's the guy who made it." And to yourself, you're we talked about the inner child. You're trying to keep that identity that the inner child wanted you to be so badly, and you're having to come to the reality that maybe you have to let that go. And if you have to let it go, what do you say to your inner child? That what, you gave it your all? Is your inner child going to understand that? Or is it something that you want to grasp onto as much as you can because this was the dream? And it's a harsh reality for a lot of athletes to come to. Not everyone can make it. There's some statistics just about who's going to make it to D1 to begin with. Just that you made it to the highest level of D1 itself is a miracle. That you're in the minute percentage or percentile of people who get to do that. And it it does come to a head for you, and ultimately it leads you to one of the darker places in your life. And again, it's the relationships that touched me the most in this part of your story. And it starts with your partner, who was the one that recommended that you should go to Herren Wellness.
Yeah.
What is it like to have someone in your life that is that supportive of you, who loves you so much that they can tell that you're struggling, even if you're not able to articulate it with words, but they want to see the best for you, and they're going to be with you by your side no matter how long that journey takes.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, um, it was you need to get help or I'm done. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Because again, it's like y- people only have the bandwidth for so much, and that's a decision that everyone needs to make for themselves. Like, what can I handle? Is this a healthy environment for me? And because she was healthy enough to recognize that this is not something that I'm comfortable with. She put that on the table. So I thank God for that,
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't healthy enough to recognize it in myself, to seek help. But again, these puzzle pieces coming together, right? I wouldn't ever had the opportunity to go to Herren Wellness if I didn't go to Cushing Academy.
Yeah.
I would have never gone to Cushing Academy if I didn't ask every coach on every visit, can you get me to Syracuse? Every coach that said no, I walked right out. He said yes. That's why I went. We ended up going to Syracuse, but it was my time at Cushing where I was introduced to Chris Mullin Jr., son of Hall of Fame basketball player. That's where I was introduced to Jamie Carey, who now is, working on my team at the Self Help Tour,
Mm-hmm.
who is the nephew of Chris Herren. So it was at Cushing where these seeds were planted that later on in my life I would need to revisit to get the help that I actually needed. It was a full circle moment, um, but it was also a moment of even more shame, you know. Um, but I'm so grateful for it because it changed my life and it completely changed the trajectory of my life. I wanted to kill myself every
Yeah.
single day. I'm on the phone with Chris Mullin Jr. and he's talking me through this. Like, just give it a few more weeks. As soon as you're home, we're going to take care of this. And it was those conversations that I needed, because I had ran out of lies to tell myself, you know. Um, but yeah, man, that's why I've dedicated my life to this work and helping athletes, because somebody else was in a position to help me and they did. Um, and ultimately I need this for my own, like these conversations that I have with these kids when I speak at these colleges and these high schools, like it's just as much for me as it is for them.
Yeah.
It's this joining of energies and feeling connected and feeling seen and heard. It's just extremely like powerful experience when you're doing that with a group of 500, 800 kids. You know.
And when you're on the receiving end of a message from someone like yourself who's just so open and honest about the experiences that they've gone through, it changes your perspective. As the podcaster here, just hearing your perspective, even before our conversation today, it's what inspired me to reach out to you, is how you just get it. You understand that there's this aspect of paying it forward. And
Mm,
I think it ties into the Jesuit education a little bit, where one of the ideals that we talked about is finding God in all things. And it's something that I challenged at the time when I heard it. And when you hear stories like yours where you're in this dark, deep place, is there really any good in it? I still struggle with that question sometimes. But what I don't struggle with is that there's certainly that perspective you can gain from it, which is exactly what you did. You can harness that pain, that really dark time, and you can say to yourself, I'm going to harness this now and I'm going to pay it forward so that no one else ever has to experience it the same way that I did.
mhm,
And that right there is strength, and that's character, and that's a testament to your integrity. And that's something that, as a young kid, when they hear that, they're going to be touched in a way that they couldn't even imagine to begin with. And I just want to focus in on Chris Mullin and Chris Herren one more time, where they had kind of different approaches to how they were able to help you. And I think it speaks to how there's not one solidified way that we go about helping somebody. You had conversations with Chris Mullin on the phone, and he was there just to reassure you that you're going to get through it. And you've talked about how Chris Herren, he was also there for you, but in a different way, where he would just show up at the facility sometimes just pat you on the head, and he would just show you that he was there. He didn't necessarily have to say anything to you, but he
Mhm.
just showed you physical support. When you're talking with kids now and you're trying to teach them about how there's multiple ways that you can go about being there for someone or just being there for yourself, how important were those experiences that you had with Chris Mullin and Chris Herren, and just understanding how you can be emotionally intelligent in more than one way?
For sure. I think, emotional intelligence in its, essence is the ability to not only recognize and identify what you're feeling, but be able to use your experiences with your emotions to better understand how to handle any given situation. And there are times where you're going to need to sit down and have this in-depth heart-to-heart conversation with somebody, but then there are also times where you're just all that someone needs from you is to just sit with them and pat them on their back.
Yeah.
There are going to be times where you might need to give somebody a hug. There are going to be times where you might just need to listen to them complain and vent and get it all out, right? All of these things are true in how you support other people, but they're also true in how you need to support yourself. And, through this last 10, 11 months, um, in recovery, it started off with Chris and Chris. Um, but now I receive that and give that, in my recovery meetings, through Herren Wellness, through learning more about the 12 steps and walking through the 12 steps. Um, like this community, um, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Like every single day you get to show up and take the mask off. Every single day you get to show up exactly as you are, whether you're having a good day, bad day, or you can't tolerate yourself. You get to say that out loud in a room full of people who support you and are there to say, yeah, I get it, you know? And you also, in the same breath, get to tell someone else, I get it. um, and that's the essence of the self-help tour, is creating these spaces for athletes to show up as they are and to take the mask off and get the healing that they need, whatever it looks like. Some days it's a pat on the butt, some days it's, we have to utilize these coping skills, and in some days it's a little bit more, harsh, and you have to have those tough conversations. But it's about being able to recognize what that person needs and to just have that, that tool in your bag to be able to give to show up with it. That's the essence of the self-help tour, and I want to travel to every school in the country and create this community. I want this community to continue to grow.
It's so powerful. That's such a powerful message, and it's such a powerful mission. And I wish more people would take the world on in that way. Where so many people just want to take the world on in the way that, I don't know, can get them the most notoriety, can get them the most money. But you're on a mission to just help people be people, to help kids just set themselves up to have a really solid adulthood, whether that's through sports or whether that's just through their general life as a whole.
Mhm.
And to do that, you have to form a really special bond with these kids, and they have to trust you. And trust is not easy. But I think
Mhm.
it even goes one step further. Is it's not just the kids that have to trust you; it's their parents too. You have this double-edged sword right here, where you have to gain trust of a lot of people, and it's a different relationship between the two of them. Can you just attest to that a little bit? How do you go about building trust with the parents, first of all, that you're going to be this guide for their children? They're going to hand off their most precious person in the whole world to you, and once they do, you're going to be the person that their kids can trust. They're going to confide in you, and you're going to be someone for them that can provide something that maybe their parents can even do. You share a perspective that their parents might not even know about, and especially in terms of
Sure.
sports, something that their kids so passionate about. Yeah.
For sure. I think the unfortunate reality of the structure of our society is that kids are in school for 7 8 hours of the day, then they have after school practice, then for 2 hours, then they have to come home, do their homework for 2 hours, and they have to eat, get ready for bed, wake up, do the same thing tomorrow. So When they're at school, they're supposed to be the best student. When they're at practice, they're supposed to be the best athlete. When they're at home doing their homework, they're supposed to be the best student. And then they have to be the best child for the 45 minutes that you have them. And then they go to bed,
Yep.
right? The average high school student spends 17 minutes of quality time per day with their parents.
Crazy.
The average high school student athlete, that number is significantly lower. So the facts are what they are,
Yeah.
right? I'm not coming in trying to replace you. I just recognize that because these stats exist and they have played a huge role in my life for better and for worse, I'm here to help you help your child get to where they need to be, so they can sustain the life that they deserve. Um, and I think, the power of vulnerability, right? Like the power of showing up and being able to look a parent in their eyes and tell them, like, listen, like, I don't think that I have all the answers. I know I don't. But and I'm not sitting here trying to tell you or your child what they need to do. I'm on this journey just like you're on this journey, trying to figure out how to be happy, how to be healthy, how to live my life in a sustainable way. Let's walk hand in hand on this journey, because when things get tough, I can at least look to my side, you can look to your left and see, somebody's with you. And because of the education that I have, I think that I have a better chance of help guiding you in the right direction because of the insight that I have, because I can see the things that you probably can't articulate right now.
Yeah.
you know um, I have a little bit more insight, so I think I can help. And I've had like some of these conversations with these parents, man. It's very intense.
I can
But
imagine. Yeah.
I think, when you see the kids respond in the way that they do, um, that's all the parents need to know. That's all they need to see is like, okay, yeah, clearly my child is gravitating towards this for a reason. So let me get out of the way. And
Mhm.
sometimes the parents are threatened by that and they feel uncomfortable because they see it as a reflection of something that they weren't able to provide. So again, it's being able to recognize what this situation calls for, and put my ego aside, and then be a sense of reassurance for that parent that you're not here to threaten or remove them from their child's life.
Yeah.
But again, without that emotional intelligence, you pull out the wrong tool, and the conversation shifts a completely different direction.
Yeah. It's such. We've been so calm this whole time, but it really is such an intense conversation, especially when you're having it with a parent. And I think it's a natural response from parents that they want to protect their child. That's always the first instinct. And when someone's coming in and they're saying that you're going to be able to provide a support that maybe you're not being able to provide, it's a challenge to their character, it's a challenge to their ego, it's a challenge to who they think they might be. And that's not the case at all. And I think it just speaks again to the gravity of what we're talking about is that unfortunately, there are some people who are going to go their whole lives and they'll never be able to make the realizations that you did. And we can sit here and say, oh, you didn't make these realizations till you're in your 20s. I wish I would have done it earlier. There's some people who are never going to do that. And they'll never be able to find that sense of joy and that sense of purpose that you have. And you're still so young. And I think for some parents, that might be the case where they might not be able to understand emotional intelligence in the way that you do, a significantly less degree, if that. And you having to come in and you're saying that I'm going to be able to teach this to your child now, and they might be thinking to themselves, there's no possible way you could teach this to a child. We're talking about things that no child could possibly understand. These are messages that you just have to experience, if anything. They're messages that no one person can be able to instill in a child. I want to call that out. I don't think that's true.
Mm,
I don't think we give children enough credit for what they're able to understand. We always
brilliant.
talk about how there's some certain language that you have to use with a child. You have to talk to them like a child. uh, I know just from my own personal experience that when I got to a certain age at like 16, 17, I loved to think that I was an adult. I wanted to be treated like an adult. I wanted someone to talk to me like I was just one of them. I didn't want to be talked to like I was a child and I didn't understand anything. Do you take that same approach when you're talking to kids? I know you work with kids of different ages, but just when you're talking to them, how important is it to just treat them like a person? You're not treating them just like a kid and you're not putting the baby gloves on trying to hold their hand through it. You're trying to tell them this is the way the world is and this is how I'm going to help you just navigate it.
For sure. And I think this is where, like, having that personal experience and that insight, to be able to draw back on helps, because again, when you're a kid, you don't realize that the conversations that you're having in your brain are unhealthy because
Hmm.
it's all you know. So it's about being able to go into their world and then slowly but surely, like, clear all the smoke and then say, okay, what's the core, what's the root of why we think that we're behaving this way,
Yeah.
and being able to just lay the puzzle pieces on the table, and then allow them to put them in the place that they belong. It's not me, trying to coordinate their life, and it's just putting it on the table and saying, let's just look at this. Let's look at this, and you tell me where you think this belongs. You tell me where you think this goes. And it's through that, allowing them to figure it out on their own without trying to force feed them information. It's That's where the growth happens. That's where they're able to walk away from a session and be able to have these epiphany aha moments because they did the work.
Yeah.
Nobody can do the work for you. Nobody can do the work for you. So yeah, like, that's what it's about. It's just like, creating a space where they feel safe enough to challenge their identity, because if they don't feel safe enough to challenge their identity, that work will never start. And a lot of times you don't feel it's hard for a parent because of the innate dynamic of that relationship. It's hard for a parent to play that role
Yeah.
because you are the person that they're trying to feel valued from. So if they show you who they really are, then that's too threatening for the kid. So you need an unbiased third party to sometimes create, and suck the intensity out of the room so that we can start to really see things for what they are.
When you try to just hand kids all these things, and you try to not even teach them, you just want to provide, it develops like codependence. And like you said, that independence is where the real magic is made. It's until you have that aha moment and you feel good when you do something by yourself, and you don't realize it if you've just been handed things your whole life. If you've been told, this is how you're going to do it, I'm going to help you get this way, until you can come to that realization for yourself, it might not even sink in that something might be wrong in the way that you're thinking. And with kids especially, we love to think that they can't think for themselves, and that they can't come to these conclusions by themselves, but they're so smart and they're so impressionable, where if you
Mhm,
start pushing this rhetoric on them that you can't think for yourself, you need to have me here, they're going to think that way for a longer period of
mhm,
time than they need to be thinking that, and that could impact them into adulthood. And it certainly is a fine line that you have to walk, where you have to promote them to be the best version of themselves. But you have to be, I don't want to call it realistic, but you have to play your cards in the correct way. And we talked about statistics in the beginning, especially when it comes to playing sports. I forgot I actually wrote down the statistics. So 7% of athletes will just go on to play in college in general.
mhm,
2% of those are playing D1. From there, 98% of the college athletes just won't go on to play professionally. So we're not even talking about going Power Five schools. Just in
mhm.
general, 2% of athletes are going to go play D1, and I don't think it's your job to just kind of shut down a kid's dream and say, look, the statistics are not in your favor right here. Like,
Mhm,
you're not going to go D1. I don't think that's the right approach. I think it's, we're going to work as hard as we can. We're going to put our all into it. But I think where you're offering that key twist is that we're not going to lose ourselves in basketball. We're not going to lose ourselves in baseball, whatever, swimming, whatever sport that we might be playing. You're there to teach them that those tools that you mentioned, we're going to take those tools that you're building up as you play basketball, as you play baseball, as you swim, as you play lacrosse, whatever. You're going to take those tools and you're going to apply them into everyday life so that you could be the best person that you could be.
100%.
That right there is invaluable, and that's why I think you're going to succeed, is because you're doing something that not a lot of people are capable of doing. You
Mm,
can't show the transition of how you take skills from your sport and bring them over into the real world. It's
mhm,
something that athletes time and time again struggle with, is they get lost in their identity and they don't know how to apply their skills that they've built up, which are key crucial skills. They don't know how to apply it to the classroom. They don't know how to apply it to their relationship with maybe a partner, maybe their family members. They don't know how to be a good member of the community. You're
mhm.
showing them that, and that's something that's really special. when you're trying to show how you can take skills and bring them from one aspect to your life over into another, do you have something that you go to? Maybe it's like an analogy or just an example that you try to teach kids about and it really helps them click? Or do you think it's just more individualized based on the kid that you might be working with at the time?
I think the essence of it all is like it remains, but it is so individualized because it's about connecting with that specific child or teenager or adult, right? And I think like what you were saying, like the essence of sports should be a microcosm of life,
Mm-hmm.
but our society has become so far removed from the essence of what it should be that it is completely transformed into something that is unhealthy. We live in this hyper competitive state where I want first, I believe our country is suffering from a vulnerability deficit.
Yep.
Second, we are, and what that translates to is this hyper competitive environment that we're all growing up in, because now when you're coaching a little league team, it's not about the kids anymore. It's about filling your ego and filling the things that you didn't get as a child. But because you didn't address that, now you're projecting all of your fears, your anxieties onto these 10-year-old kids. They feel that energy, right? Um, and then because that's the approach that you're taking as the coach, these kids aren't developing the skills, the coping skills, the problem solving, the reflection skills, the discipline that it takes to translate these skills that they should be developing in sports to the real world. Because as a parent, you want to protect your child so much that when they're not playing or you're not seeing them get the reward that you think that they deserve, you want to pull them away and put them on another team. And what you're doing in your brain is saving your child, but what you're actually doing is creating this codependency on, and this form of thinking that if I don't get what I think I deserve, then I need to remove myself, instead of realizing that one, the obstacle is the way. And if I face this, while it may not be comfortable, I may develop innately the skills and the tools that I need that will ultimately translate into life, but will also help me in my respective sport, right? It's like this, like yin and yang, like experience where it just happens to balance itself out if you take the right approach.
Yeah.
Uh, if you try to overcompensate, overparent, micromanage, you're creating a higher level of dependency for that child. They don't have a sense of individuality. They don't have a sense of independence. They don't have a sense of self, a sense of identity outside of I'm a victim and somebody needs to rescue me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it just becomes this generational curse within families where the parents pass on the inability to identify, process, and manage their emotions, and then it gets down to the kids, and then the kids give it to the kids, and it's just this terrible cycle.
It really is. And one of the harshest days is when you become an adult or just become a young adult and you realize that your parents aren't Superman and Superwoman. And
Hmm.
this whole time you've been growing up thinking that they got all the answers figured out. And
Hmm.
you eventually reach the point where you're like, "Ah, damn, they don't.
Hmm.
And none of us do. And
Hmm.
if we play pretend and we like to think that we do, that's how that cycle continues. And it's
Hmm.
until you become wise and you say, all right, there's a flaw here and I need to be able to figure out how I can fix it. I think another thing that we do as a society, especially now, is we run at the first sign of trouble. When that obstacle presents itself and it's like a 10-foot wall, and we don't even realize that there's ways to go around it, go underneath it, drill a hole through it, we're like, no, I'm going to run away. I'm done. And I think one of the key reasons that we do that is we don't know why we're doing the thing that we are to begin with.
Hmm.
And I'm interested to hear your perspective on that question of why, because it's a question that you could answer all the way throughout your whole life. You knew why you wanted to play basketball. You knew why you wore number 14. You knew why you're doing what you're doing now. you can answer that question for yourself, and it has helped you get through every single struggle that you faced, and every single day that has been the hardest day of your life. You've gotten through it, and you're here today, and you're helping people get through it. When you're trying to help kids find their why, what's that conversation like? Is it a conversation? Is it just more of something that has to develop over time? And again, is it something that they need to find by themselves?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it's ask why again.
Mm-hmm.
Like ask why again, right? So in reference to what you just said, okay, why you want to I knew why I was waking up at 5:30 in the morning. I knew why I wanted to play at Syracuse. I knew why I wanted to play in the NBA. I had I had my why. But then ask why again.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like you need to take care of your family? Why do you feel like if you don't play well, it means that it, you're not a sufficient enough man? Why do you think that if you have a bad game, that equates to you being a bad person? Why? And then ask why again. And then again and again and again until you get to the root of what it is that you're running from or running towards. And if the answer at the base of all of that isn't something that you think is true, then you need to redirect your direction. You need to redirect where you're putting your energy, because most people have a why. We all have that like instilled why for the first question, but it's the second one that feels a little bit more threatening, and it's the third one that feels even more threatening, and it's that fourth why that will completely expose you. And it's the ability to sit in that space and challenge yourself that will ultimately get to the true essence of what it is and why you're behaving the way that you are. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. 100%. And that was
Okay.
really well articulated. It's such a powerful thing that we need to be able to do for ourselves. And it's something that I do at not on a daily basis, but I constantly think about that question of why. And I love the way that you phrase it. It's just drilling down deeper. You can always go one level deeper. And until you can find that core and you can say, this is my bedrock and this is what I'm going to build upon, you can't build the life that you're looking for. If the
Built on
foundation of the
sand.
building is just, I don't like the curse, but if it's just bad, you can't build anything successful.
Yeah.
The building will fall, it'll implode on itself, and you'll find yourself back at the exact starting point that you didn't want to be at in the first place. And it's three little words put together to ask one question, but it's one of the central questions of life that we ask in all aspects of it. And again, man, this has been such a pleasure to do this interview. Your perspective on life as a whole is just something that I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of. And I know as you keep going in this pursuit, that question of why is going to be at the center point of what you're doing. And I know days are going to be hard. I know there's going to be a lot of grinding, going from school to school, going all around the country, making your way. Maybe some days even thinking about why am I still continuing to do this? But I encourage you, just think back to this conversation today, because I can tell why you're doing the things that you're doing. And if you ever lose sight of that, I just want you to think about that 14-year-old kid that you used to be, and think about him, and think about everything that you've been through up until this point, and never lose sight of all the experiences that you've had. I know there's been a lot of ups and downs, but you're going to help so many kids. And I know, I don't even hope, I know that one day you're going to be able to be in the shoes that you want to be in. And that's helping kids at any level, whether that's the college level, professional level, just helping them find their way. And it really is inspiring.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Of course, of course. Thank you once again to Kaleb for joining me for today and being able to be so strong. And it really takes a lot to pay it forward. And he is doing incredible work. And I encourage you to support him well beyond listening to this podcast. Thank you once again for tuning in for today. If you enjoyed today's conversation and you want to see even more incredible conversations, please follow along and leave a rating wherever you may be consuming this podcast. It really is such a privilege to be able to do this for you all. And I can't thank you enough for being a supporter. Until next time, see you.